The educational materials presented here were developed by students and faculty of the Department of Food Science and Human Nutrition at Iowa State University. Funding for this project was provided by grants from the American Cancer Society Midwest and the Lance Armstrong Foundation. The materials are intended for educational use and are not meant to provide medical advice. We welcome your feedback about these materials. Please use the evaluation survey link on the homepage to provide your comments and suggestions. In this presentation, we will discuss calcium and the link to cancer. Calcium is an essential mineral which must be consumed in the diet. The daily recommended intakes for calcium are highest during the peak ages of bone growth, between the ages of 9 and 18 years old. The recommended intakes remain fairly high throughout the rest of the life, 1,000 milligrams for 19 to 50-year-olds, and then 1,200 milligrams for ages 51 and older. Calcium-rich foods include dairy products such as milk, yogurt, cheese, and dark green vegetables. The calcium found in dairy foods is very well absorbed, whereas calcium in vegetables is poorly absorbed. Obtaining adequate dietary calcium may be a challenge for persons who do not regularly consume dairy foods, and there is substantial evidence that calcium intake is inadequate for many people. For this reason, many foods today have been fortified with calcium. Cereals, breads, orange juice, and other foods can be found with added calcium. Milk and dairy are the richest sources of calcium. A glass of milk provides about 300 milligrams, and a container of yogurt about 230 milligrams of calcium each. Spinach and fortified cereals also contribute to calcium intakes. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in the body. There are two major roles for calcium. By far, the majority of calcium found in the body is stored in the bones and teeth, providing structural support. However, this is a very small and tightly controlled amount of calcium that circulates in the blood. This calcium is required for muscles to contract, blood vessels to expand and contract, secretion of hormone and enzymes, and transmission of impulses through the nervous system. All of these functions are supported with less than 1% of total body calcium. A wide range of people may be at risk for calcium deficiency. Children and youth require adequate amounts of calcium to ensure proper bone development. Consumption of dairy products, particularly milk, during these developmental years is of great importance. As adults, bone mineral loss begins to exceed accumulation in the natural aging process. Postmenopausal women and the elderly can become at risk of calcium deficiency associated with bone loss. People with poor diets, particularly lacking in dairy foods due to lactose intolerance or vegetarianism, may also be at risk for calcium deficiency. If dairy foods are not tolerated, calcium supplements should be considered at any age. Current research reports that calcium has been shown to play a preventative role in colon cancer and breast cancer, especially breast cancer in premenopausal women. The exact mechanism by which calcium prevents cancer is unclear. At the biochemical level, it is clear that the calcium binds to both bile and fatty acids in the gastrointestinal tract to form insoluble complexes. Because the calcium is bound to the acids, it reduces the ability of the acids to damage cells located in the lining of the colon. Calcium also acts directly in reducing cell proliferation in the lining of the colon. Both mechanisms are thought to contribute to calcium's prevention of cancer. A strong relationship between calcium intake and colorectal cancer was found in participants of the Nurses' Health Study and Healthy Professionals Follow-Up Study. In this study, researchers analyzed about 135,000 men and women and found that the people who consumed 700 milligrams of calcium a day reduced their risk of colorectal cancer by 35 to 45% when compared to the people with intakes of 500 milligrams of calcium per day or less. This effect was only recognized in the distal area of the colon, and intake showed no effect on the proximal colon. Another study done by the National Institutes of Health, American Association of Retired Persons Diet and Health Study, showed that high intakes of total calcium, dietary calcium, and calcium supplements were associated with a 20% lower risk of colorectal cancer among men and 30% lower risk among women. Another study examined women living in Iowa. This study compared 34,000 women divided into two groups. One group consumed approximately 1,280 milligrams of calcium or more a day, and this group was compared to a second group of women with calcium intakes of about 800 milligrams per day or less. Total intakes in these two groups were from both diet and supplements. The group of women who consumed the higher intake of calcium, which was 1,280 milligrams, were associated with a 41% reduction in colon cancer risk, while the group of women which consumed calcium intakes of 800 milligrams or less per day showed no reduction in colon cancer risk. The Nurses' Health Study included 3,000 women and concluded higher calcium intakes of more than 800 milligrams a day reduced the risk of breast cancer in premenopausal women. The study compared two groups of women where one group consumed a higher amount of calcium of 800 milligrams per day or more, and the second group of women consumed a lower amount of calcium of 200 milligrams per day or less. The group of women with the higher calcium intakes consumed calcium specifically from dairy products and in particular low-fat or non-fat milk, yogurt, and cheese. The researchers concluded that the increased calcium intake of 800 milligrams a day or more from dairy sources did reduce the risk of breast cancer in premenopausal women, but not in postmenopausal women. Another analysis that involved more than 30,000 women was the Women's Health Study. This study again compared two groups of women. One group contained women who consumed 1,366 milligrams of calcium or more per day, and the second group consumed 617 milligrams of calcium or less per day. Results of the study found a reduced risk of breast cancer was associated with the group of women with the higher calcium intake when compared to the group with the lower intakes. This study also saw only reduced risk of breast cancer in premenopausal women. Throughout this presentation, you have learned how calcium plays a role in cancer prevention. The recommended intake for calcium is 1,000 milligrams per day, which is based on the research that this amount is enough to reduce the risk of colon and breast cancer in premenopausal women. Since vitamin D and calcium are so closely linked, the recommended intake for vitamin D is 400 IUs. However, this value is under debate. As research shows, much higher levels of vitamin D are necessary to achieve the cancer prevention benefits. There are many ways to incorporate both calcium and vitamin D into your diet. Vitamin D can be consumed naturally in fatty fish such as tuna and salmon and in eggs. Many cereals and milk products are also good sources of vitamin D due to fortification. Calcium-rich foods include milk, yogurt, and cheese, but remember to choose low-fat varieties of each of these products. Dark green vegetables such as broccoli, spinach, and kale are also rich in calcium. Many foods on the market today are fortified with both calcium and vitamin D, such as fruit juices and most breakfast cereals. By modifying your diet to include more foods that contain both vitamin D and calcium, you may be able to reduce your risk of certain cancers as shown during this presentation. If reaching the recommended intakes of vitamin D and calcium through foods alone are not possible, your daily requirements can be obtained with the use of dietary